the CEO says, okay, we are big enough and we're ready. Let's hire the big company people. And they bring in 3 or 4 people from the Microsofts and the Amazons. And then what sometimes happens, which is very difficult to observe and is important to coach through, is tribalism.
Right.
There's 2 tribes. There's the big company people who don't believe that the original folks know what they're doing, and the original folks think the big company people are too slow, and oftentimes that tribalism can really damage the company.
Your program had 65 people and from 23 different countries, right? So how did cultural differences, especially around vulnerability, shape the results for these individuals?
For me in particular, fundraising was one of my strong suits as an entrepreneur and as a CEO. I love doing it. It's essentially sales, but I have a finance background, and getting someone to agree to back you.
Please share with us the top 3 things that have contributed to your success so far. So folks, you have tuned into TGV, and hearty welcome to the Guiding Voice podcast series, the world's only quadrilingual podcast at this moment of recording, and we are trying to embark into multiple languages as we speak, and here we embark on transformative conversations for a better future, and we want to simplify and amplify your journey to success. I'm your host Navin Samala, dedicated to making the world a better place by bringing you wisdom through valuable discussions with experts designed to simplify and amplify your success. And thank you so much for tuning in. So folks, we are joined by Ronen Oshansky. He has traversed the world of entrepreneurship, coaching and leadership, having co-founded Cross Campus and coached alongside business legend Keith Ferrazzi. With a career spanning Wall Street to Silicon Beach, he's here to share his insights on building high-performance teams, decision-making, and the power of networking in an AI-driven world. And as we prepare to delve into our conversation on the topic at hand, from connections to success, harnessing the power of networking and leadership, here is an exciting twist. Let us tickle our guest's brain. So, Ronan, get ready for a rapid fire round of random words. I'll mention a few, and I would love to hear the first thing that comes to your mind in response without thinking much. Shall we get started?
Hello, I'm Steve Ahern, one of the judges of the Asia Podcast Awards. I'm interrupting this episode to let you know that you're listening to an award-winning podcast. This podcast won its category in the 2024 Podcast Awards, so you know you're listening to quality. Enjoy your listening experience, and congratulations to the team who created this award-winning podcast for you.
What a wonderful intro, Naveen. You should be one of those people who announces boxing matches. That was such great energy. I love it.
Thank you for the compliment, and we'll get the ball rolling. Curiosity,
Connection,
invention,
technology,
future,
exciting,
book,
super communicators,
universe,
natural,
role model,
parents,
success,
growth-minded,
generosity,
social capital,
vulnerability,
human,
connection.
vulnerability.
And here comes the last one, transformation.
Self-actualization.
All right. Thank you so much for participating in the first rapid fire round so sportively. And Ronan, there is one more rapid fire round towards the end of the episode, so stay tuned. And first of all, hearty welcome to the Guiding Voice podcast series. How are you doing today?
I'm doing so well. Thank you for asking.
All right.
And excited about a lot of things.
Yeah. Perfect. That's so energetic, I would say. And before we get started, let me acknowledge Veena Sampath Kumar for connecting us both. Veena, thank you so much for connecting us with amazing Ronan. And Ronan, let me begin with my first question, a standard question which I introduced recently. Who is your guiding voice?
Who is my guiding voice? Oh, wow. Do I have to have one guiding voice?
You can have multiple.
Sometimes it's my girlfriend Julia, who's a wonderful support in my life.
Hmm.
Sometimes it's Keith,
Yeah.
big decisions and on networking. Sometimes it's my children with their innocence and their honesty.
Wow. Wow. Amazing. And now let's begin with your success mantra. Please share with us the top three things that have contributed to your success so far.
Wow, the top three things. So one of them I think is just a high level of compassion and a low level of ego. I like to
Hmm.
think of myself at this stage of life as high compassion, low ego. And I think what forges our character is the struggles in life. And so
Hmm.
without those struggles, you can't get to this point. And I certainly have had my fair share of them. And they've made me stronger. I think that's one thing. A second thing is certainly cultivating the network that I have today and at different times in my career as my needs have changed. For example, founding a company and raising money or becoming
Hmm.
team coach, I have been very intentional about building a network around me to support those ambitions.
Hmm.
So that's two. And then three, Naveen, is I have to say curiosity. You use the
Hmm.
word curiosity in the lightning round. Being curious about how things work, about
Right.
what makes people tick,
Right.
is such a powerful thing to cultivate in our lives for business success as well as just satisfaction.
Yeah. So I love the fact that you mentioned about struggles, right? Because struggles are the things that make us who we are. In fact, even I have had my own share of struggles and like lack of career guidance. That is one of the reasons why I started the guiding voice. And in fact, I have had a few days during my graduation where I couldn't eat because I did not have money, right? So we had financial struggles and many more things, and that's why now I'm on a mission to shape the careers and lives of millions across the globe. And thank you for sharing that. And let's move to the next one. So please talk to us about the toughest lessons that you have learned in your entrepreneurial journey.
The toughest lessons that I've learned, I think one of
Hmm.
them was not to be too reliant on raising money. So for me in particular, fundraising was one of my strong suits as an entrepreneur and as a CEO. I love doing it. It's essentially sales, but I have a finance background and getting someone to agree to back you. But it can also be almost like a drug that you get addicted to. And so oftentimes you see entrepreneurs raise money as opposed to focusing on how to right size their business or design it for profitability. I learned that lesson the hard way with Cross Campus. I raised almost $30 million, and I felt like I was constantly raising money. I was on
Yeah.
this hamster wheel of raising money.
I loved I loved your response to this one, and I think, and especially in India, the startup culture is booming, and almost everybody is focusing on raising money rather than value addition, right? So let the value be added, and then valuation comes, right? So that's a great reminder. All right, so we'll move forward, and your entrepreneurial journey began on Wall Street and led to founding Cross Campus, one of Los Angeles' leading co-working spaces, right? So what inspired this shift, and how did your early experiences shape your leadership style?
Mm. Well, what inspired Cross Campus was I started in 2012, Naveen, when Silicon Beach was now what was this renaissance in Los Angeles. And going back a few years before, in 2009, I tried to start a business. And it
Mhm.
was the first time I tried to start a business. It was a fairly simple business. It was an investment management business. And what I found was that all of the pieces fell into place, with the exception that I didn't have a co-founder with me.
Mhm.
And I had this beautiful office in a building, and there was all this activity around me. There was a trading floor in front of me, but I didn't have a community around me. And
Right,
so, as someone who leans extrovert, I craved that connection with people that I didn't have. And
right,
ultimately, it just felt too lonely. It just felt too lonely. I abandoned it. And when I thought back a few years later, I said, boy, that's what people need to get them through that valley, that challenge, the momentum early on. And so Cross Campus was born out of the idea that we should not only work together in a beautiful, well-designed space, but we should leverage one another one another's insights and connections. And so it was beautiful to grow that community and see co-founders finding each other. I think we had a couple of people get married out of the program.
Oh,
So I
wow.
guess I can take credit for one or two children being born in the world. But that was the inspiration for launching Cross Campus.
Lovely, lovely. And you have coached alongside Keith Ferrazzi, like whose book Never Eat Alone is considered a classic on networking, right? So what key lessons did you take from working with him, and how do you apply those to your coaching today?
Yeah. So one of the most important reasons is, and by the way, the same principles that apply to us building our professional networks and how to build connections with people applies to leadership teams. And so we would I coached dozens of leadership teams of high growth companies. And, one of the things that our research showed was that the bigger predictor of success for a team is the relationships among the team rather than individual smarts or skills or brains of the people. And the way that you build solid foundations in a team is on an emotional base.
Right.
You start by leading with generosity, and that opens people up to vulnerability, actually showing their struggles and who they are, which ultimately leads to the most important thing, which is candor. Having the conversations and saying what needs to be said, not what someone necessarily wants to hear. It's those teams. And it's interesting, Naveen, when I see, and now I've coached so many teams, when I go into a team and I see that they're conflict avoidant and they're not saying what needs to be said in the room, I'm almost certain that the team it's not going to end well for that team. So that candor that's built on the base of generosity and vulnerability ultimately generates trust. That candor is critical.
Yeah. Wonderful. And I can resonate with you. In fact, right now I have a day job and I have a fantastic team and we discuss everything openly. And in case if we need help, we first approach within ourselves saying that, hey, I'm stuck here. Can someone come here? And I'm really poor at so and so. Would you be able to help me? Right?
How did you do that is the question, though, because I suspect that you modeled that behavior, right? Because the leader modeled behavior and you modeled it. And that's why the team saw that it was okay.
Exactly. All right. So you have worked with, again, high growth companies in very different contexts, like right from startups to industry giants like Cisco, right? So what are the key differences in the challenges faced by teams at various growth stages? Because right from, like, if you think about starting versus accelerating and then getting to a particular stage, right? So there are various stages.
There's so many things, Naveen, right? And so if I had to let's focus so there's startup, but then there's growth stage and there's mature company. Let's look at the difference between those last two. Mature companies like Cisco, if they make mistakes, if the relationships aren't great, if they don't say what needs to be said, the stock price might suffer and the executives might leave and go to another company, but the company will survive. But if it's a Series B, Series C, high growth scaling company, if you don't hit the KPIs and the metrics, you may not get the next funding round. And if you don't get the next funding round, it's over. So there's an existential risk. The other thing, and by the way, I find coaching high growth private companies much more interesting than coaching the public companies. The public companies tend to be more sort of set in their ways. There's a lot of bureaucracy to work through. But one of the differences I found was in a startup, and especially in a mid high growth stage company, what typically happens is you go from a team where the culture is early employees, entrepreneurs, let's break things, let's figure things out. And then at some point, the CEO says, okay, we are big enough and we're ready. Let's hire the big company people. And they bring in 3 or 4 people from the Microsofts and the Amazons. And then what sometimes happens, which is very difficult to observe and is important to coach through, is tribalism.
Right.
There's 2 tribes. There's the big company people who don't believe that the original folks know what they're doing, and the original folks think the big company people are too slow, and oftentimes that tribalism can really damage the company.
Yeah. And your new venture, Connected Success, teaches people how to harness 2 superpowers, generosity and vulnerability, to build deeper connections, right? Can you share how these 2 traits play into effective networking?
Yeah. And by the way, Veena was a participant in the program, and we have this amazing global cohort of 65 people from 22 different countries. I think we had a half a dozen people just from India alone, Indian background. Generosity and vulnerability are just two components, Naveen, to a system. What we developed, Keith and I, is a system that tells you how to organize your time, who you should reach out to, how you should reach out to them, how often to follow up, as well as how to ensure that when you do meet someone, you can reliably go deep with them and connect consistently and build that depth of relationship. Because what we found people wanted was they read Keith's book, Never Eat Alone. It's a business classic. It's sold 1 million+ copies. And it's a great book. It has a bunch of little bits of wisdom. But to really be successful at networking, you have to have a system that works for you. And you need to practice these skills with people. And that's what we brought together with the program that we call Beyond Connections.
Love it. And you said your program had 65 people and from 23 different countries, right? So how did cultural differences, especially around vulnerability, shape the results for these individuals?
Oh, yeah. So that was one of the most interesting parts of this experience, Naveen. I can speak for myself. I grew up in a Soviet family. And, boys don't cry and don't show weakness and don't be too nice. Don't give too much. They'll take advantage of you. Those are all lessons that, unfortunately, in some cultures and countries we're taught. And they don't serve us very well later in life. The best thing we can do is try to unencumber ourselves from those limiting beliefs. And it's not easy. I'll tell you what, one of the things I coached are, especially some of the people who are of Indian background, especially Indian men, was, look, I'm not going to tell you to, next time you meet with someone on a Zoom, go in and just tell them, boy, my life is terrible and my marriage is falling apart. That's not what I'm suggesting. You also have to be tactful, but just go about 10 or 15% outside of your comfort zone. Share a little bit more. Share something that's a little challenging, a little struggle. Hey, what I'm finding difficult about my business right now is just finding good people. Get a little bit vulnerable and see the connection that engenders between you and that person. See how good it feels. And then open up a little bit more, because there's something called emotional contagion. Emotional contagion. It's a psychology concept that means that our emotions, we can catch emotions like we can the common cold. If you're happy and you have that beautiful smile on your face, it makes me happy. Right. If I come into a room and I'm sad, it'll make other people sad. The most contagious of emotions is vulnerability. If you meet someone and you learn to open up and share with them what's deep inside you, your beliefs, your values, your judgments, your struggles, they will reflect that back to you. They'll open a little bit up to you. You open a little bit more, and it creates this beautiful cycle of connection, and you can go deep very quickly.
Yeah, got it. And let's double click on this vulnerability part, right? Nowadays, vulnerability is most often heard, right? So what role does vulnerability play in leadership development, and especially in high stakes environments like the ones you coach?
Look, it is absolutely critical for any good leader to learn to open up about his or her struggles. So vulnerability and fallibility. But I was wrong, right? Being able to admit that you're wrong is just as powerful as being able to admit that you're struggling. As a leader, think about it. When times are tough, and they get tough in almost any business, and you have crisis or big challenges, what motivates people to really put their head down and work hard for you? It's not the money that you pay them. It's not the acknowledgement that you give them. Certainly those things help. It's how they feel about you and about the rest of the people on the team, and how they feel about you as a leader will be impacted by how vulnerable you are and how human you are. It'll humanize you. And it's something that's very difficult for a lot of very alpha leaders to accept, right? Like, if I can't show them that I'm weak or that I don't know what I'm doing, but the opposite is quite true. So it's a superpower that's absolutely worth cultivating. And there's so much written about this over the last 10 years. I'm sure many of your viewers have read about the power of vulnerability.
Absolutely. I loved all the responses, and this has been an incredible conversation so far. It's time for us to add some more spice and some more excitement to the episode. If you're ready, I'll kick off the second rapid fire round.
Let's do it.
Okay, here comes the First bullet. If you could have one gigantic billboard anywhere with anything on it, what would it say?
What would the billboard say? I love the mantra from the American spiritual guru Ram Dass in the 60s. He said, love everyone and tell
Mm-hmm.
the truth.
Oh,
Love everyone and
wow.
tell the truth. If everyone in the world did that, the world would be a much better place.
I bet. Okay, can you describe yourself in just one word?
Compassion.
And what is the most impactful book you have read recently?
Boy, I've read a bunch of great books. I think one really important book, especially for people at our stage of life, what we call the second adulthood, the later half, the last half of life, is a book called The Middle Passage by James
Mhm.
Hollis.
Ooh,
Short book, wonderfully written, based on the psychologist Carl Jung's ideas about how we shift from our first adulthood to our second adulthood. Great book.
Oh. And what is the best advice Keith Ferrazzi ever gave you?
Wow, that's going to be hard. Keith has given me a lot of great advice over the years. One of the things that he does that's extraordinary, and I see this when he interacts with someone, when he speaks to you, he is laser focused on you, understanding you, what makes you tick, how can he be of service, what are you struggling with? So often, especially when we go to events or conferences, you see people who are talking to you and their eyes are going around the room or they're thinking about what they want to say. If you can cultivate that extreme focus and presence on someone you're talking to, they will feel it and it feels extraordinary.
Yeah. It reminds me of one of my ex-bosses. Like he used to do that. And I admire him for that particular attribute. Irrespective of the level of the other person, he gives equal importance and that attention, right? Which is really, really important. Great.
Isn't that beautiful? Isn't that beautiful? And I think it's something that can be taught.
Yeah.
Assuming you practice it, taught and
Right.
practice and
Right.
cultivate it.
Right. And then what is your top productivity hack?
My top productivity hack is something called the 25-50-minute calendar. And it is absolutely beautiful. It's the quickest and easiest thing. I coach all my CEO clients on this. You change your calendar. So instead of booking, let's say, an hour, it books automatically 50 minutes. If you have someone supporting you on scheduling, you let them know. And then you have 10 minutes to reset, take notes, breathe, collect yourself. Plus, you're less likely to be late to the next meeting. And you cut your previous meeting 50 minutes down to 50 minutes. You cut your meeting time by 17%. And boy, we all want less meetings these days. So that one simple change in how you design your calendar, changing 30-minute meetings to 25, an hour to 50 minutes, is incredible productivity hack.
Yeah. In fact, we started implementing that very recently and it is so productive. Okay. And here comes the next one. In one word, what is the secret to great leadership?
Boy, it's a toss-up between two. Service, the servant leader, right? The leader who leads from behind. And I think, if it's a word, egoless. So putting yourself and your ego aside. So often our ego gets in the way, particularly in a position of power. The best leaders, I think, nowadays can be servant leaders and can really manage their ego.
All right. Here comes the last bullet. What is one thing you wish everyone knew about networking?
One thing I wish everyone knew about networking, I'll cheat and I'll do two. One is be intentional and set up a system. Because if you don't have a system and you expect to just do these things and they're not in your calendar and you leave it up to chance, it won't get done. You won't invest in your network. And the second thing I want people to know is that there's a myth that extroverts are great at networking and introverts are terrible at networking. I can't tell you how often I hear this. It is completely not true. There are actually certain things that introverts are shown to be better at. They're better at having conversation and discussion. They're more empathetic. They're more able to sit down behind the desk and organize their CRM and their system. So although extroverts have a lot more energy, gas in the tank to meet people and talk to people, introverts as a whole can be just as good, if not better, at networking.
Wonderful. I loved all your responses, quite insightful. And let's flip back to the mainstream. So, Ronan, what advice would you give to leaders or professionals who are trying to rebuild their network from scratch?
Well, in addition, again, to being systematic and intentional, what I would say, Naveen, is don't wait until you need it.
Yeah.
Don't wait until you're at that point where you're transitioning in your life or your career, because by that point, it might be too late. Build and invest your network ahead of when you need it.
Right. I love it. One of the biggest mistake that people do is whenever they need a job or whenever they need some opportunity, they start connecting with old people, and we get carried. Okay, we start thinking about it. Why the hell is he connecting with me, or is she connecting with me? Right. So that exactly.
Exactly. And there's that, well, I haven't heard from Naveen in 2 years. Why is he reaching out now? And you, but on the other side of the coin, you don't want to feel transactional. You don't want to
Right.
feel like you want something
Exactly.
from someone. So there are actually techniques in the program, and I don't think we have time to share them now, but there are techniques in the program for how you rekindle a connection without being transactional about it.
Wonderful. And Ronan, just one more question. Again, you may skip to answer this. I'm absolutely fine. But who are top 2 people who you would recommend to be hosted on my show?
Top 2 people who I recommend to be hosted on your show. Wow. I'd have to come back and think about that. I think just in the 65 new connections that I made in this program, and I was just on a session with them just now talking about LinkedIn optimization. There's such an incredible group of people. There's a gentleman, a Moroccan man in Australia who's a chef, and there's a woman in Boston who is just this extraordinary recruiter. There's so many wonderful, wise people in the program. So I will take a rain check and come back to you with 2 recommendations. and what is it? Carry forward the generosity that Veena showed in introducing me.
All right, sure. I would look forward to hearing from you. And I thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. Very profound. And how is your experience being hosted on The Guiding Voice?
Oh, it's been super fun. Thank you. I love your energy. And by the way, let me say, and I mean that what you're doing, and you mentioned this earlier, I didn't fully understand this when you and I were introduced. Providing a guiding voice for young people so they can make the decisions in their life and their career. I wish I had that when I was young, because I was a very strong-minded, bullheaded young man who took a lot of risks and traveled around the world and made these decisions. And I wish I had had the wisdom of mentors and advisors. We didn't have podcasts at that time, but to be able to listen to something like this and capture the wisdom the way you're capturing it is a true blessing to the world. So thank you for doing it.
Thank you. Thank you for the kind words, and I really appreciate it. And I'm looking forward to hosting you again in future. So let's keep in touch. And thank you once again.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure.
Right. Sure. You too. And friends, that was our episode with Ronan. And before we jump into the fun trivia section, we have a quick request. If you have enjoyed the conversation just like I did and found it useful, please share with at least 3 of your friends or colleagues who would also like TGV, The Guiding Voice, so spread the knowledge and help others grow just like you. Now it's time for us to hop into the trivia segment. Having had amazing conversation about the power of networking, leadership, vulnerability, I thought I would present you 2 lesser known facts about the origins of people networking. The first one is about medieval trade guilds. Long before modern networking, medieval trade guilds in Europe served as early networks for artisans, merchants, and also craftsmen. And these guilds were tightly knit communities where members supported each other in business, shared resources, and also set industry standards. And guild members also trained apprentices, creating a legacy of knowledge sharing and professional connections that laid the foundation for modern professional networking. And second one is ancient Chinese Bao system. In ancient China, a system called Bao, which means reciprocity, was used as an early form of social networking. And individuals would exchange favors and obligations with each other, creating a network of social bonds based on trust and mutual benefit. And this practice of reciprocal relationships, often through family and extended community ties, influenced the way people did business and built long term connections. And it shares similarities with the modern concepts of networking, where trust and generosity are key. So that's it from my side, from the trivia perspective. But I would love to hear from you. What are one or two key networking tips that you would like to share with us? Please let me know. If you're watching this episode on YouTube, you can comment there. Or if you have found this episode through social media platforms and heard it on any audio platforms, you can comment on social media, and I would love to learn many more tips from you. So thank you so much for tuning in and also for being part of our awesome TGV family. So folks, until next time, take care, stay inspired, and remember, the best is yet to come. Goodbye for now. See you all in the next episode with another amazing guest. Take care. Love you all.